Welcome to Let's Talk About It, a podcast created by students for students. There's a lot of talking going on these days, but oftentimes that talk seems empty. We're searching for real, genuine conversation. We want a space where we're able to talk about everything from the serious to the seemingly mundane and see how faith informs that conversation. Have something on your mind? We do. So let's talk about it. All right, guys, welcome back to Let's Talk About It. We are in our series. We're cruising along in our series, 10 Commandments in 2020, and we're on the Fourth Commandment, one of my favorites. So this episode is called The Fourth Commandment in 2020. I have with me
Clayton
and
Aiden.
The original's back with me this time. And we've been in this series. Clayton, tell us a little bit. 10 Commandments in 2020. We like to kind of recap at the beginning of each of these episodes. Tell our listener a little bit about what we're trying to do here.
So we're just trying to relate what the Bible and the 10 Commandments has to say about, and how it has, what it has to say and how it reflects in our days today in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. So much stuff going on. So many different events, so many things catching our attention on the news and our Facebook feeds, our, I guess, Instagram feeds, Twitter feeds, whatever feeds you're looking at there, news stations. So much craziness, but man, when you really look at it, the 10 Commandments have a pretty applicable piece to say in the conversation. And guys, I said in the very opening one, number 1, number 4, obviously number 3, had a great talk with Arlia and Noah there. That's pretty applicable today too. I didn't realize how strongly applicable it was. Each of these are certainly applicable, but each of them are a little bit stronger. But the Fourth Commandment is one of my 3 favorites I was really excited to talk about. And Aiden, just get started. What I say, Fourth Commandment, and actually, I actually need to be clear too, because there might be people listening from different backgrounds, and that's awesome. So different walks of faith. I am going off of the numbering system that we use in the Lutheran Church. So Martin Luther, when he laid out the small catechism, he kind of numbered the commandments this way. So we've been through 1, 2, and 3, which are all about honoring and loving God. All right. So we have you shall have no other gods. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord, and remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have those 3 all grouped together, and now we're jumping into the next set. So the next set of 7 that are all about loving your neighbor. So at number 4, when we're going by Luther's listings of these things, Aiden, what is it?
Well, we started off with honor your father and your mother.
Yeah, honor your father and mother is the 4th commandment. So when you guys hear that or you guys think about it, what comes to mind? Again, you guys have had background. You guys have gone through confirmation. You've heard someone talk about the 4th commandment, or you've done some sort of something with it before. What comes to mind when you think about the 4th commandment?
Well, just having respect for your parental figures, not necessarily just your father and your mother, but anybody that's over you.
Okay, solid. Clayton, how about you?
Definitely just in one word, be respect. I guess it's just a big thing about it.
Yeah. So there's this level of respect, honor that carries with it. I mean, when you hear that, I mean, if you were to explain, maybe you had a kid who hasn't learned about 4th Commandment yet sitting in here, how would you explain it to them? Like, how would you go into a little more depth to explain to them, this is what the 4th Commandment's all about. This is why it's important.
Well, we should just tell them that, you should trust in what your parents have to say, because they've lived through life and they know what they're doing. And so you just have to have trust in them, that they know what they're doing, and that God will lead them to lead you to do good things. But also you need to have the respect and the understanding that, they are your parental figures and that they are over you in a certain degree, not necessarily over you to where God is, but to a point where they're taking that role as a role model.
Totally, yeah. And in so many ways, like when we try and unpack that for kids, like ultimately, right, you have, and I talked about this a little bit in the first episode, Genesis is so important for a lot. It's a groundwork, right? It's a really important piece. But we understand that man was made in God's image, and then it even clarifies male and female, they were made in his image, right? So there's that piece of that married couple, the parents thing is a reflection of God, an image of God. Like, we're all image of God, no doubt, but there's also this piece of that. So you have that God kind of places in your life these people who are certainly not perfect, but it's kind of in the place of God for a while, right? Because you can start drawing. I mean, what are some connections you can make for some people of how are your parents like God? What are some things your parents do that God also does, type thing? What's come to mind?
Well, the fact where they're able to just tell you and teach you the ways of life. Not necessarily always through experience, but through their words too. And that's kind of what God does. He teaches you through his word, how life is supposed to happen, kind of.
Totally. So there's a level of teaching you, helping you to grow for sure. Let me throw it this way. Do you have a place to sleep at night?
Yes.
Do you have food? Like, are you pretty healthy as far as what you can eat and stuff like that?
I could stand lose a few pounds. But.
Right. Yeah. But the reality is you're not hurting or hunting for your own food, right?
No.
So there's a level of provision that's a piece of it too.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, parents are a reflection of the Heavenly Father. That's the duty they've been given, right? And it's a really big challenge for parents. And there's certainly, and we don't necessarily have time to go into it in this podcast. It'd be great to fully unpack it. Luther's Small Catechism is a great resource. Concordia Publishing House recently actually redid their Small Catechism with explanation, and excellent. It really is. I was so skeptical going into it, but really breaks down a lot of questions about, like, it has expanded questions on the commandments. So, like, what if your parents are not great representatives? What if they are actually abusive? What if all these things? Answers it completely in a godly way, and how to honor the Fourth Commandment, even in light of some circumstances that God doesn't want and things like that. So anyways, it's just kind of interesting how parents are a reflection of it. But as we dive into Luther's meaning, though, and Clayton, I'll actually have you read that one for us, of that question, right, that we've been wrestling with every time, of what is this, or what does this mean? What does Luther have to say this honor thy father and mother means in its fuller form?
He says, we should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them.
Yeah, totally. And so the key word that kind of expands this is that phrase, other authorities. And we'll certainly get into that when we kind of take that corner into 2020. But the other kind of fun facts, and I'm going to want to hear your guys' reflection. What does this say to you, or how does this resonate with you? The other fun facts I always like to kind of point out about the Fourth Commandment is actually when God gives to Moses the commandments, this is the only one that has attached with it a blessing with it. So God says, honor thy father and mother that it may go well with you in the land that you're going to, sort of thing. So in other words, it's good for you. Honor your father and mother. It's good for you. So reflect on that one. Why?
Oh, it's definitely good, because you know, if you don't honor, or in other words, respect your parents, from experience, you definitely get the punishment for sure. Yeah,
exactly. And again, I like Luther's phrasing here: despise or anger our parents either. Right? Why? Because it's not good. It's not, like, it can't go well for you. Whether you're a believer or not, you can see this, right? And that's why I love it. What God says makes sense every single time for me. Well, and again, sometimes you have to dig a little deeper. But when you really let God's word do what it's doing and say what it's saying in its fullness, that's what happens. So you despise your parents, yeah, it's not going to go well with you. You know, you anger your parents, yeah, good luck. Like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, so to speak, right? And then the other kind of fun fact I like to point out is that. Like, again, we talked about at the beginning of this episode, the first three are all about honoring, loving God. The next 7 are all about honoring, loving your neighbor. And who's first in line right behind God? Your parents. So it's interesting that the way God's putting this order into things is your parents are next to God as far as the respect that they need. All right. So when it comes to loving people, and there's kind of a little bit of an order to this. So it's just a little fun fact again. So your parents are your neighbors, right? They're also your parents, but they're your neighbors. So they're another human living creature, and that's a piece of it. So here's the ultimate question. Let's turn it into 2020. How are we doing with this? How is honoring our parents going in 2020?
As in, like, our parents, or like just other authorities?
Of what you're watching. So let's start with just parents. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're seeing in your friends, what you're seeing in your communities, things like that. How do you feel like your Facebooks, your Instagrams, whatever? How do you feel like we're doing on honoring our parents in 2020? And what situations come to mind with that?
I would say not great for a lot of kids, because, like, if you look back, 50, 60 years ago, it was like required that you don't ever talk back to your parents. And, like, you know, if you did, it's something bad's going to happen. You know what I mean? But I feel like nowadays it's like, you know, there's so much laxness between parents and kids that it's like, you know, the kids are spouting off to the parents and the parents aren't doing anything about it. And that is kind of causing, like, problems in that form.
Yeah, definitely getting distracted, I guess, with other earthly things, and like we're kind of taking our attention off of what really matters, which we see from the Fourth Commandment.
Yeah, totally. And so it's interesting because I don't think necessarily, Aiden, what you were kind of unpacking is unique to 2020. We were already seeing this. There's just this level of like, I think we've said it in another episode. I can't remember now, but like the idea of like, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? You know, like how do you talk to your parents that way? Like how can you say things like that to your parents? And people are a little more hurtful. It seems a little more open to it. I mean, why do you think that is? Why is that more natural for people to do? Where does that come from? What's the source?
What's the source of what?
Of that disrespect piece. Where do they learn that, I guess? Well, there's the level, right? I'll throw the Bible answer out there so y'all don't have to, but there's a level of it's a sinful nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's a level of they're picking this up somewhere, you know? They're learning this somehow to be disrespectful to their parents or to outright hate them or something. Where is it coming from?
I mean, I hate to use it because it's so cliche now, but like social media is a really big form of it because kids are able to see how other people are treating, you know, their parents. And a lot of kids on social media have a good look like they have a good relationship with their parents, but then all the things that are popular on there are things that kids are doing where they're like getting into trouble and doing stuff like that. And so it carries over into that kid because they're seeing that and they're like, oh, I can do that too.
And so when you're saying social media there, is that like TikTok then, I'm assuming? Or
Could be
is
TikTok.
that kind of stuff popular?
Anything. I mean, Instagram, not Facebook, because young people don't use Facebook.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Especially those that are being disrespectful. Facebook, more people can see it, grandma can see it, stuff like that. Yeah. So that's interesting, right? I mean, like, and I think that's true. I mean, I see it, like, I'll see kids crawling into high school and then crawling into 10th grade even and still kind of being this disrespectful piece. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Where do you learn this? I know your parents, they're not at all like this. I know they didn't raise you to be like that. You weren't that way until about 7th grade when you became an angsty little whatever. But like, so it's kind of fascinating on that one too. Well, I mean, talk about this too. I mean, 2020 specific though. We went into quarantine, all right? We went into stay at home. So what did you guys see in the social media world with that kind of stuff as far as honoring your parents? Did that get worse for people or was it better for people to finally be around their parents? What are you seeing?
Can you repeat that again?
So like we jumped into a pandemic unwillingly and we were forced to stay at home. So children were at home with parents, parents were at home with children. Do you think honoring your father and mother, we were better at it or worse at it, and why?
I think we might have thought that we were doing good, but then you definitely see how your parents are staying home more, so they see more of what's actually going on in the home. So in a way, yes, in a way, no.
So what do you mean by what's actually going on in the home?
Because like for like the respect piece, like they might have been mouthing off type deal, like speaking under your breath, not doing chores maybe or something like that. That's kind of hard to run away from whenever your parents are stuck at home with you.
Gotcha.
24/7.
Yeah, you don't have school to run away and
Yeah.
then parents forget about it and things like that. Yeah. So there's not this timing gap or this spatial gap anymore. This is kind of in your face kind of thing.
Yeah, I would definitely say, I think I would have to say that it's kind of situational too.
Oh,
Because I feel
totally.
like every family is kind of a little different when it comes to that. Because some families are really good when they're together and not good when they're apart. And others are not good when they're together and they're good when they're apart. So I feel like it's kind of situational. But for the most part, I feel like it's kind of been beneficial for people to be around their family and be able to, you know, just kind of take a step back from their normal life and just be a family again.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this that I'm kind of noticing too is, I mean, you guys have seen this, the whole idea of like a double life. So your friends can be this person at school and this person at home. So what happens when those are the same place now, you know? Or like I hear this from people all the time too of when they finally hear their kids playing video games. They're like, where did you learn that? How did you, like, why do you talk like that? That's not how we talk. That's not how we do things. Like things like that. And so you're doing this at school and now school's home. And so that's where things are getting picked up on. So it's kind of just that interesting dual role of things with that. But that's kind of the easy conversation to have for this episode, right? The 2020 Fourth Commandment in 2020. But really that other authorities piece is where most of my conversations have been when it comes to reflecting on the Fourth Commandment in 2020. And it starts to get into that question of how are we doing it honoring authorities? So guys, you've seen my list. Which of these do you want to talk about? I mean, when it comes to this is what got me excited about the podcast, was kind of starting to point this out of how we treat other authorities, whether or not we honor, serve, obey, love, and cherish them, and whether it's a blessing for us or not. How has this whole conversation got confused or interesting in 2020? What are those areas you want to talk about?
Well, for me, I think that a part that's kind of gotten mixed up in the whole, craziness of the pandemic is that people aren't respecting the stay-at-home order stuff. They're not respecting the mask mandates. I think those are two very, very big things right now. And a lot of people just, especially in Texas right now, I mean, you go drive down any kind of freeway right now and it's packed with people, and it looks like nothing's going on.
Right. I can't tell you how many times, even in just the past week, I've had to ask people, we are still in a pandemic, right? Like I can't tell when I'm out going to work and things like that. Granted, guys, and if you're listening, I have been a little more limited, but it's more so because of my role. So I see people because I'm a pastor. That means I see older people, I see younger people. I don't want to be responsible for spreading. So that's a piece of it. I was also pretty much a homebody before this happened. It was real. I worked a lot, certainly got a lot of hours in. I got to breathe a little bit in the pandemic, a little more than I had in the past. But so there's a little bit of that to a preference, a little more of an introvert myself. So not completely dying as many extroverts are in this pandemic. But yeah, so there's this layer of your government officials, so authorities in our lives, like when you start, go back to civics class in high school, right? And the executive branch, you have the president, who executes the laws, and under that is police officers and everybody else. And there's this level of, and the legislators are leaders and they're making the laws. And so they make these decisions for us, which is not comfortable for anybody. Nobody likes being told what to do. Zero. None of us. Especially in America. We're awful at that, right? And again, I'm including myself in that. Yeah, in Texas. Add to it, Texas. Yeah, like I have that phrase, "Come and take it, Texans." Right? I like that. Good luck telling a Texas man what to do or how to whether he has to do something or anything. Like you can suggest all you want to, but you're not going to tell him. So you have that, and you have these things that are supposed to be kind of keeping you safe or helping to keep you safe. And I kind of laughed. Actually, one of my favorite memes in this whole thing was, "Look, if y'all will just tell the SEC." That if you stay at home for 2 weeks and don't go out, then we'll have college football. We'll get rid of this virus in 2 weeks, because there's a layer of, actually, if people would stop spreading it, we could get back and things like that. But the reality is nobody wants to, right? We had our stay at home time in its really restricted forms in the very beginning of all this. But since then, we're opening up in comfortable ways. And that's actually the part I've loved about being in Texas is I feel like Governor Abbott's been, he's gotten flack a lot of times, but here we are again. We're at the beginning of August at this moment as we're recording, but the plans he set in place worked, right? So he kind of said we're going to open up in pieces, and then we found out, there was a little bit of a spike, so we had to close back down a little bit. But now we're again at the end of July. We're back to a more normal-ish kind of feeling, as normal as we felt in a pandemic. So that's the thing is we can kind of trust what Governor Abbott's saying to us, because and any governor, right? In that sense, I hope that's the hope, and I'm an idealist. I get that, but it's because they're listening to the best. They're listening to authorities and things like that. So I don't know. I've now said a whole lot. What are you guys thinking in terms of that conversation?
What are you thinking, Clayton?
He's all over the place on that one, and just the way of how the state's doing it, I guess.
Well, just the authority of people to be able to tell us what to do to keep us safe.
You definitely see how people don't agree with what the authority's going to say,
And
for
would you-
sure see that.
Well, would you say the majority of people you know don't like that, or who's the majority, who's the minority? People who are following or people who are not following?
It's hard to tell these days, really, what the majority and what the minority is, because you see on news and on social media.
Sure.
It's back and forth. It's like 50-50. It feels like almost constantly.
So take away, and this is going to sound bad to some listeners, I'm sure. Take away news sources right now, or what articles you're reading from your experiences with people you're talking to, or people's social medias, because I do think that is a clear thing. Now, certainly, people are doing their trips to hikes and they're isolating with families. So using your own experiences, and this is so anecdotal, so nobody's quoting us to make any decisions, but like from your anecdotal perspective, what's the majority, what's the minority? People are following or people are not following?
For the most part, I feel like people are following, but at some point they feel like, okay, this is just feels like too much. Like there's too much control. And that's why I feel like the majority is.
Yeah. I would have to semi agree with that. I think in Texas it's definitely especially in Houston right now, a lot of people are following the mask mandate. Whenever I've gone out, I don't think I've ever in the past like month so far, I don't think I've seen one person without their mask on, or without their mask. Yeah, without their mask on. In public when they're around people. But I just don't understand the stay-at-home order thing, why people can't just, and I do understand it in a way of you have to go and you have to make money and you have to, keep working, and that way you can support your family and do all that. But, if we're trying to really get this gone, why don't we just, kind of stop?
Yeah, and so that's the interesting question too. And again, I'm going to try and get us back toward the Fourth Commandment in this one. But just my quick perspective that I think is getting us a little off topic is that, remember the goal, right? Is it to eliminate coronavirus? Good luck, because it's here, it's with us, it's the way a virus works. But the whole, like at the very beginning of this, we really saw that goal of flatten the curve. And ultimately, I think our government officials, at least here in Texas, have really kept that at the forefront of their decisions. And so that's really it. We don't want to overwhelm the hospital system. So maybe you're listening from another state right now, but there early July, we were concerned, right? Because typically at that time of the year, you have heightened hospitalizations in general. And then we add to that COVID cases, and we got a little scared. We had to tuck back in a little bit to the stay at home, restrictions. But now, again, I think that's lightening up a little bit. We're doing the right thing according to Governor Abbott at this moment in time. So that's good. But kind of going back to the Fourth Commandment, though, in 2020, we're kind of asking this question of, to what extent do we honor and respect our authorities regardless of whether or not we agree with what they're saying? So it goes back to your parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you agree with everything your parents said growing up for you?
No.
Absolutely not. Yeah. But did you honor it? Did you respect it?
Yes, for the most part.
For the most part, right? And then when you didn't, how did that go?
Not well.
Not well, yeah. So it's kind of the same thing for us too. Now there's a level, certainly there's some probably a far right conservative out there that's super terrified of what I just said, because we'll become or far left, I don't even know. That's like, no, well then we'll become totalitarian. You can't just listen blindly and all that stuff. I'm all with you, buddy. Don't worry about that. But because I think we're all aware enough for when that time comes that I'm not afraid of some government takeover personally, and that's just the personal perspective. But there's a level of just honoring and respecting decisions, and that kind of ties into some other things. So I think of schools, right? School officials are making decisions, and from your social medias, how are people doing? Are they serving, obeying, loving, and cherishing those people that are making those decisions?
No. A lot of people are mad because of the way that we're running school now. Because a lot of schools are doing online or hybrid stuff, like Sam Houston, which is a school that Clayton and I are going to. They're doing hybrid, and so that still incorporates the online, and a lot of people they don't want that. They want in person, want it the same way it always was, and it's hard for school officials now, because it's like, what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're trying to keep everybody safe, but you still want to have school, so we can keep on going. But to a certain degree, you just have to, like we've been saying, just kind of have some patience and some respect with, those people, because they're really trying to make the best decisions that they can.
Exactly. And now so I'll layer the Fourth Commandment on, and then I'll double layer the Fourth Commandment onto it. You have the layer of the Fourth Commandment says, look, They are trying to make the best decision for the people that God has placed in their authority. So we need to honor and respect it and trust that they're doing the best that they can in that situation. Now, the double layer comes in. Now imagine being a parent trying to make that decision of whether or not your student's going to go to school or not too. And now parents are feeling the weight of that. And hopefully if there is a parent listening, they go, oh, that's what school officials feel right now too. I have to decide whether or not my kid is going to go back. That's what they want. That's what I want for them, but what's safe for them too. And again, I love a couple of people, and listener, you're probably picking up on how many times I say again, so I apologize on that one. It will continue to happen. It's one of my little quirks. If you didn't notice it already, you will moving forward. But parents are now saying, my favorite thing I've heard from this for parents to hear is, oh, you've chosen for your child to go back. Good for you. I know that was a hard decision. Oh, you've chosen for your kid to do virtual learning. Good for you. I know that was a hard decision. You get it? Whatever decision you are making, it was a hard decision, and good for you for being able to make it. Now, I'll go the extra layer, and this is not for me. This is for anybody that goes to another church. So this is not for me. We're all good here. We all get it. But this is where it started to layer on too. Now imagine religious organizations and the freedoms we've been given. So in Texas, at least, we've been given the freedom to worship. There's no restrictions on us, because it's funny. The news right now is getting really angry about protests, whatever. Right. I mean, and again, there's a layer of legitimacy to all of it. As long as it's coming from a loving your neighbor, loving God perspective, I'm cool with it. But they're like, well, churches can't meet. And I was like, actually, they can here in Texas. But that's because Governor Abbott and our Texas government was not going to get in the way of religious freedom and liberty stuff, right? But as now church officials, religious officials, so this is all religions, we now have to make decisions based on what's best for our people and try to do the best we can. We're in the same position that school officials are in too. Here at Trinity Clown, in a unique position of both school and church. And guys, I'll tell you at least this part, it was fascinating, the opinions people have had over the last 4 months and how they've chosen to share them. Now, I will equally say there was incredible support. We knew we weren't alone. So again, I'm saying I'm not speaking to Trinity Klein, but certainly if you're going to another one, it's just interesting how people have done, because I want it this way. This is how I would do it if I were you. And there's a layer, according to what Luther writes in the Fourth Commandment, or how he expands it, of you. That's like you telling your parents, I would rather do it this way, mom and dad. You're doing it wrong. Like, you don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine ever telling your parents that, right? Well, and I know as I get older too, it becomes even harder, right? So your parents are older than you, and they're still your parents no matter how old you are. So if you don't agree with decisions they're making, you don't really say anything, right? You can support them, you can have conversations, but ultimately you're respecting them, because it comes down to the Fourth Commandment for me too. So it goes to all of these different layers, right? We've talked about a lot. I've certainly said a lot. Anything else on that piece of the subject you guys want to?
On school officials, or
just school officials, government stuff? 2020, man.
2020 in general. Well, I mean, you can also lead it to the protests and stuff like that.
Totally, exactly.
The police brutality stuff.
Yeah, and the police brutality becomes interesting. So particularly two high-profile cases, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and certainly there's even more controversy coming out now, because there can be, about George Floyd, and if there's going to be controversy, the world's going to chew on it, right, and pursue it. But the reality is, at least from a very simple perspective, police, in some respect, certain police officers, so not the entire police force in America, certain police officers abused their power to do something, right? And it ended up in resulting in murdering two individuals. And there's lots of talk about it, right? And then we had protesting about it and things like that. So there's this great big question about authority. Now, I will be one to say, because I know initially I was one who was like, yeah, we need to talk. We need to have some conversations. Let's talk about it. But I know initially I saw someone post like, well, I'll say it, police officers, we love you and all this. I was like, no, we do. Like I think that's the missing piece in the talking past each other in this conversation, is that we still honor and love police officers, no doubt about it. What we don't want is abuse of authority on any level. We don't want it in government. We don't want it in healthcare. We don't want it in school systems. We don't want it in churches. We don't want it in households with parents. And we don't want it in the police officers either. And I think most police officers will tell you they're cool with police reform too. Yeah, let's do our jobs the best we can. And I'll stop talking in just 1 minute. But like, again, very anecdotally, loved walking with George Floyd's family in Houston because as you did, you walked by police officers. Everybody was waving, smiling at them. And they're saying, hey guys, definitely glad you're here. Please just be respectful and please let's not cause any trouble. And that was what the police officers of Houston were telling us that day. And everybody's like, yo, thank you for being here, stuff like that, keeping us safe. So much respect. So this whole added a whole nother layer. But what do you guys have on this topic?
Well, I mean, you kind of already hit the nail on the head. It's an abuse of power. But so you, to a certain degree, with the honor of your father and your mother, you have to know your limits of when that power is too much and when that has turned into more of an evil thing than it has, something else, like for good kind of thing.
Yeah. And so where do you see that, where's that tip? Where's that tipping point?
What do you think, Clayton?
What's the tipping point?
Between like honoring authority and they're abusing authority.
I feel like it's pretty much situational.
Oh, totally.
You definitely see it in like different situations. But yeah, like there's no way that our government's like training cops to be police brutality. Like they're not going through their what's it called that police go through?
Training. Yeah.
Their training. They're not going through that training to hurt people. They're going on there to protect, serve, and protect type deal.
Yep.
They're working for the government. So I mean, it's like you can see it any type of way you want to, but there's no way I feel like there's no way that they're being trained to go out there and hurt people. Well,
and so that's an interesting piece, at least. So I'll at least offer a piece into the conversation on that. So like it came out too, like that. I mean, think about it. Like, well, the George Floyd, the controversial one, because I don't think Breonna Taylor is controversial. I think everybody is pretty much on the same page of that was awful. That's miserable. George Floyd, that tactic of putting your knee on someone's neck, I believe, Google me, tell me I'm wrong, we'll correct it another time. That tactic was still in the training manual. So it's like, at some point we're able to say, is that the best way to do it? And granted, again, autopsy stuff's coming out. There were more factors, but certainly, or not autopsy, but body cam footage. Autopsy was very clear. It was suffocation, So that tactic, okay, we can have that conversation. That needs to change. There's a few other things that people are pointing out. Again, I won't take a stand, but I guess you can probably assume where I'm standing. Of people are saying, hey, what about this? What about this? Can we think about this? Can we think about this? That's kind of encouraging people that are trying to use authority in a negative way and empowering them and equipping them to be able to do that versus the overall, right? People aren't doing that. And Breonna Taylor, though, that was one that's a pretty clear, like, the girl shouldn't have died. It was what's the name of the raids that they did? I can't think of it. The listeners are going to be screaming it, but we're not going to be able to think of it. But it was a raid that shouldn't have been, a thing. And she died. She lost her life because it was like someone went in the wrong house, And the reality is, I mean, you can ask that question of, even if it was the right house, should you do that? So I think there's legitimate questions being asked, and I'll throw it this way at least. And I think hopefully we can all agree on this. There are legitimate conversations that should be happening or can be happening in this time. If nothing else. And all I ask from Christians is that everything you do, say, and think is loving God and loving your neighbor. And from everyone else, I just ask for that respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Clayton. It's kind of situational too.
Oh, totally. Because I agree with you too.
You completely have to look at, where everybody's at in that situation, But with the specific ones that we're talking about, you can definitely see where, what's going on needs to have a little bit of the Fourth Commandment in there, but
yes.
But even from the side of the police officers.
Oh, sure. Well, and that's the thing. And I hope you can see, I think the way I describe myself personally is that I will probably, most likely in the way that I talk, anger both conservatives and liberals in the same conversation. Easy. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head too, in that there is something that people that are protesting, who are against police things, there's things that they're saying that are not, I'm sorry, F the police is not honoring the Fourth Commandment. I don't agree with things like that. I don't even agree. And again, hate me for it if you will. I'm sorry, cancel me, whatever. I don't agree. No justice, no peace. You know, I didn't shout that when I was walking, only because I'm like, no, like we should still want peace even when there isn't justice. You know, and this is just my religious convictions coming into play. And at the same time, I'm saying, I get why you're saying that. I get why you're shouting that. I get the anger, or I don't get it, actually. I don't get your full anger because I don't have your experiences, but I'm wanting to hear from them and listen from them and go forward. And then on the other side, it is the Fourth Commandment needs to be applied for police officers too. Same way God calls parents, you have a great responsibility, a significant responsibility to raise up and protect children. Police officers have the equally thing. The person that they are serving in that moment, they want to protect. They want to do these things. And there's a layer of that also, hopefully, other police officers can do that for their brothers and insert that. I can't do that. I can't say where you're missing the point because I'm not in your shoes. I'm not in your cars. I'm not in your brotherhood. But brotherhood can call out brotherhood, and that's a great piece of it too. So, man, we talked about a lot of here in 2020. And this is why, again, I thought it was so relevant, the Fourth Commandment in 2020. It makes you just think of how God calls me to truly love my neighbor. And this is how he starts off the list. So ultimately, where do you think we're landing? How are we doing it? Honoring, serving, obeying, loving, and cherishing both parents and others in 2020? Or what are your parting thoughts on that layer of things?
Clayton, you got it.
As we depart here.
What's
Sorry.
that?
Repeat that again.
So how are we doing? Or what are your thoughts about how we're doing honoring, serving, obeying, loving, and cherishing both parents and other authorities in 2020?
Definitely a struggle.
Definitely a struggle. Okay. What advice do you have? And this is going to actually lean into the question we've been ending with for each of these episodes so far. Episode 5 here. I was getting wrong. Fourth Commandment, but episode 5 of what are some things you feel like we should be talking about, or because of this conversation, what are some things you hope people are taking away with them?
What you got?
I was just gonna say, I think that you have to. I think the biggest thing to take away is just to remember that there's a limit to authority, especially like in any instance. If it's a political figure, if it's a police officer, school official, your parents, whoever, there's a point to where authority is too much in a sense, and you just have to know that point and understand that at some point, respecting and honoring doesn't have to be full obedience to that, if that makes sense.
Sure. And again, I would point people toward the catechism on that one with abusive parents. And that's really where it comes into. And I think the summary is this: if it's causing you to sin, you don't have to honor it, But ultimately, if it's not causing you to sin, if it's not causing you to be unloving or disrespectful toward God or your neighbor, then it's probably okay to follow authority. That's ultimately it. If it's benefiting, or it's good for the glorifying of God, and that's not being diminished, or the loving and respecting of your neighbor, then it's probably okay to honor that authority. But if it ever crosses that line, that's when there's the problem piece. And I think ultimately what your thoughts got me to, Aiden, were the ultimate authority, which is God. And you ultimately have to point that to it. And that's why I lean toward that love God, love your neighbor thing. Mm-hmm. So Clayton, how about you? What are some conversations you feel like you're hoping happen and as you go forward from this place, or other people are having?
Definitely just the fact that your father and mother may never be right, or your authorities might not be in the right, but you do always have to hold that honor piece, kind of like what Aiden was saying. You have to have that honor piece, not in total full on your knees praising type deal, but you do always have to keep that honor and respect for that person or person of authority.
Exactly. And again, how it's unpacked it by Luther: honoring them, serving, obeying, loving, cherishing. Might not be the decision I want, from my parents or from my school administrators or from my pastors or from my political leaders, but I'm going to do my best to honor, serve, love, and obey them and cherish them. So yeah, totally. Great conversation, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for listening to us. And guys, definitely, again, I've qualified enough times. Like I might have this wrong. I don't claim to have anything fully right. I'm coming at my perspective alone, hopefully trying to bring in that lens of the 10 Commandments into 2020 along with these guys. Send us your questions. We would love to be able to talk about those maybe in a follow-up episode later this fall or something like that. But man, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time with the 5th Commandment in 2020. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to give us a follow. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, the Trinity Klein app, or both Instagram and YouTube at TK Crew Students. Have a topic in mind you'd like us to use as a theme? Let us know. Let's talk about it. We'll see you next time.